This is actually kind of a funny story. A few months back, I was hanging out with this guy. You might have heard of him. His name is David Lynch. Yeah. If you don't know who he is, he low-key invented being weird.
January 16th, 2025 was the day we heard about the passing of David Lynch. Probably one of the most unique movie directors up until this point. And I've always been mostly into video games. Some movies obviously as well, but mostly video games. And video games is a very iterative medium. There's a ton of game developers and directors who were clearly inspired by movies. In fact, I might suggest that some of the best video games ever made are Japanese video games inspired by Hollywood movies. There are so many cases we can just point at something and say, hey, that's taken from Aliens, and hey, that's taken from Terminator, or They Live, RoboCop, and obviously Star Wars and Star Trek. And even film directors had their inspirations before video games. They were probably inspired by books, something that I never really managed to get into. Inspired by art, obviously by older movies and TV series and stuff they grew up with as kids. But you can't really point at anything David Lynch has done and said, hey, that's directly inspired by this thing or that other thing. I mean, sure, he made something that was like a noir film or like an old soap opera TV series, but he also has his own brand of mysticism. I don't really want to call it horror. It's hard to call horror. It certainly can be scary in some parts, but it feels more like something out of a dream, where unexplained stuff happens and there are stuff that might unnerve you or scare you. And I think everybody can agree that that's the vibe you get from anything David Lynch has made. Certainly there's also a bunch of video games out there with very clear inspirations, most notably Deadly Premonition from Swery, a Japanese developer. Again, another fantastic game because it is so directly inspired and has its own Japanese twist to it. And obviously almost everything that Remedy Studios have done, like Max Payne, Alan Wake, very clear that they are huge David Lynch fans. And even though it is clearly iterative, it's okay because it's video games, and video games are interactive, so they get away with a lot of things. And speaking of iterative, January 16th was also the day we were introduced to the Nintendo Switch 2, the day where it was revealed. And as the sequel to the Nintendo Switch, this was personally exactly everything I had hoped for, with a huge Switch backlog. I'd love a new system where I could play the new games with more power behind them, which I hope they will have. Nothing on that has been announced yet, other than they do work on the new system. But I did see a subset of people who were a little bit disappointed that Nintendo didn't go crazy and try to completely reinvent the wheel. There was someone expecting the jump from the Nintendo GameCube to the Wii, and maybe that's because they associate Nintendo with a sort of whimsicalness, and as a company that kind of introduces stuff that sometimes can feel completely unique in the space, and surprisingly enough seems to get incredibly popular a lot of the times. Of course, we're not talking about all the failures like the Nintendo Virtua Boy, but we could mention the Nintendo 3DS, which is still very, very impressive to this day. If you haven't turned on your 3DS in a while, do check it out, because the way they managed to make 3D that you can just look at with your eyes, that didn't need any special glasses, that was an incredible innovation, especially if you get one of the later models, the new 3DS. where the eye tracking is even more improved than it was originally. And while Nintendo did tease that kind of mouse thing that's been going around, the idea that you can turn the Joy-Con on the Switch 2 on its side and use it as a mouse, it'll still be curious to see how much this idea will actually kind of latch on to video games, to future video games on Nintendo Switch. Right now we live in very PC-centric times. I feel like the Steam Deck computers in general are way much more popular than video game consoles are these days. I've spoken to at least 2 other parents whose young kids all wanted gaming computers for Christmas and birthdays, simply because they were influenced by the YouTubers they were watching. And speaking of the Steam Deck, it's hard not to draw parallels to the Nintendo Switch. It obviously kickstarted something with its form factor, and you've even seen other handheld PCs and other Linux-based devices pop up that uses that form factor, and some of them even have detached sort of Joy-Cons, if you will. But nobody has actually had the idea before of taking the detachable Joy-Con and using it as a mouse. So maybe this will make the Switch 2 the first of these kind of consoles that bridges a gap, that is able to take PC games like real-time strategy games and other games that doesn't need to be awkwardly adapted to controller configurations, and just make them playable on your living room TV. Now you might say, well, I need a flat surface to control a mouse. But I think anyone who's used a mouse for any extended period of time will tell you that, well, the surface doesn't actually need to be massive. If you control stuff on if you use a mouse pad, just a regular old mouse pad, you'll see that it's not very large. It's something that could easily fit on maybe your thigh or on the seat next to you. I mean, I think it's something you can easily adapt to without it feeling uncomfortable. But I guess we'll have to wait and see until April what Nintendo has in store for the Switch 2. And I don't know, it's just weird that the passing of David Lynch and the announcement of the Switch 2 was in the very same day. So I want to say rest in peace, David Lynch, and welcome back, David Lynch. A tremendous source of inspiration when you were around, and a tremendous source of inspiration for the future.
Welcome to bonus stage.
I was so close to becoming the ultimate ninja!
What in damnation happened down there?
Nozick was assassinated.
The Adeptus Mechanicus report said engine failure.
That's not what I saw.
Sergeant. Traitors.
Chaos.
Chaos. Chaos.
Chaos.
Chaos. Chaos. Chaos.
Chaos.
Damn it! The fighting's everywhere but here! What you call this? These are leftovers.
I have recently been playing Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2, and I love 40k. I've always been a big fan, ever since I saw a Space Hulk painted miniature at a bookshop back when I was 10 years old. I was completely sold on the universe, and it's always kind of stuck with me through my entire life, even though I've never actively played 40k, the miniature war game. But I've loved reading the rules for the game, playing video games based on the 40k universe, and even though I've mentioned earlier that I'm not really into books. That's not, in fact, completely true. I did read some of the Gaunt's Ghosts book, and that was on my daily commute to work. But this was also way back before smartphones. Now that we have smartphones, there's literally no reason to read a book ever again. Anyway, Gaunt's Ghosts have been tremendous books and a great look into just how dark the Warhammer 40k universe is. And Space Marine 2 is a tremendous game with a lot of respect for the original lore. Much like the first game, it's a third-person shooter that mixes shooting and melee combat. And you kind of replenish your health by doing finishing moves on enemies. So it's a game that kind of rewards you for playing aggressively. But it wasn't really this game in particular I wanted to talk about. It was more the tagline for the entire Warhammer 40k universe, which is, "In the grim darkness of the far future, there's only war." And this is like the third really great Warhammer 40k game I've been playing over the past year. But this time it got me thinking, wait a minute, is there only war? Isn't there any time for fun or for doing any kind of stuff? So I kind of started investigating the levels in all these games, kind of looking around at stuff, because there truly is only kind of war stuff going on. In Space Marine 2 you're always kind of in a battlefield or in a factory, and a lot of times it seems to be like you're in some kind of church or monastery, but that kind of ties into the lore of the game. What I was interested in is there any other stuff to do in these dark worlds of the far future? But running around in Space Marine 2, it's all conveniently Space Marine sized hallways, like even these military tents that it looks like you could go into. You can't go into them, but they certainly are big enough for you to go into. There isn't anything going on in there. It's just beds for people to get ready to get up and go to war. What I mean by that is that there doesn't seem to be any kind of leisure activities. And walking around a war-torn city, you start noticing just how different this is from your kind of stereotypical cyberpunk future that you see in other games. There's literally no signs of capitalism anywhere. Sure, you might see flyers or signs on a wall, but these aren't to advertise any product. They're all just there to tell people to look out for Xenos and join the Imperial Army. Literally no adverts for stuff like cars or hot dogs or anything. But this is just Space Marine 2. Let's take a look at one of the other games I've played, and that is Dark Tide. This is a sort of Left 4 Dead style co-op game where you get to play as an expendable convict who has to run missions over and over again in what's called a hive city, which are massive mountain-sized cities where billions upon billions of people live. But even running through a shopping district here, you don't see any adverts for anything. There are these red signs that you can see here, which you can't seem to decipher, which could be adverts for something, but it looks more like store signs really. And none of it seems to disclose what kind of inventory or what kind of store it is. Again, a lot of monastery looking buildings, and notice again here how someone seems to have a permanent job just lighting candles everywhere, just like in Space Marine 2 and like the next game coming up here. It's kind of fascinating, a world this steeped into religion, or should I say worship of the God Emperor, that it's literally all they have going on. And here again, I haven't noticed anyone or anything partaking in any sort of leisure activities, like playing cards or playing tabletop war games with miniature figures that you paint yourself. It is literally just get up, go to war, go to bed, and repeat. There's not even anything that kind of looks like a fancy restaurant or even a takeaway place. Not that I've noticed at least. But moving on to the third game here, which I've played quite a lot, it's Rogue Trader. And Rogue Trader is kind of like a Western role-playing game where you play as the titular Rogue Trader who has this massive scroll on their ship, which is signed by the god Emperor and gives you a carte blanche to just do whatever you want. And again, you get to see a lot of monastery-looking Gothic architecture with a lot of candles as you set out to defeat chaos with a ragtag group of interesting characters who all have their own abilities and backgrounds. And here I'm running around in another city district in the 40k universe, and you might notice again here that there are pretty much no stores. I did find these food stalls around here. There's some flavor text that says that they were left in a hurry. So someone is selling food somewhere, at least in this game. And all the billboards and posters that looks like ads at first glance is really just stuff telling you to join the Empire. A Rogue Trader is a really cool game, really immersive role-playing game, and it's pretty well written as well. But it's a shame they didn't have the biggest budget in the world. You can definitely feel some corners cut here and there, with maybe only like 40% voice acting throughout the game. The one detriment I might say to the game is that it has too many dang skills. There's this whole thing about setting up debuffs on enemy characters and buffing your companions, which really makes every combat encounter drag out for way too long. I think they should have trimmed it down just a little bit. Really wish that the developers of this one had Baldur's Gate 3 money, because there's so much cool stuff going on that would really benefit from an even flashier presentation. And it's so well written that I think that it would probably have gotten the same mainstream appeal as Baldur's Gate 3. But hey, maybe that's something for sequels sometime in the future. But getting back to my point, the Rogue Trader is kind of a freelance agent and not really part of the military from what I can gather. So there's some hint of more leisurely activities going on, especially if you look around your private quarters, where you have hunting trophies on the wall, and there's even this really nice pool bath thing here, but literally no toilets anywhere. Thinking about the two other games I've mentioned, I don't think I've seen any toilets in those games either, and that's kind of strange because, you know, toilets are a pretty big deal in a lot of other video games. But hey, if you're really good at just one thing, why not just stick to that one thing? And if war is the thing of the Warhammer 40k universe, so be it. In the grim darkness of current day, there's never been a better time to play video games, and there's never been a better time to play Warhammer 40k video games. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you again. Bye.